Now, while things are looking doom and gloom for Arsenal right now with the title looking out of reach, there is understandably a lot of disappointment with the result against West Ham especially. Now, in this video we're going to talk about how these constant problems keep evading Arsenal to becoming that winning team, and we're going to try and figure out some solutions that we could potentially do in the future that would help us be overall better. So let's get into it. Now, ultimately Arsenal have a severe problem right now within the squad. There is obviously more injuries than we can really deal with in the forward areas, and playing Marino up front is definitely not viable. Graham Potter said after the game against West Ham that they expected us to play him up front, and they kind of played for that, which made it very hard for us to do anything. Now, with that being said, I don't even think with the players Arsenal had fit that are injured right now, we would have been able to do much against West Ham. Maybe specifically some certain chances would have been taken a little bit better, but ultimately it's the same problem Arsenal have had in the entire time Arteta has been in charge, and it's them physical mid blocks. Now, this is when teams are very compact, usually at the Emirates against Arsenal, where teams will fill the box and the centre of the park. They will want Arsenal to go out wide especially, but they will be on 10 especially on that right hand side. Now, something West Ham did specifically very well, which was what Bayern did against Arsenal last year, was that they basically stopped any progression happening down that right hand side because they were intent and physical and quick on the players down there. As soon as Timber, Odegaard or Waneri received the ball, West Ham will be pushing and tackling them instantly and getting players around them to kind of put Arsenal off going down that side. They had to work incredibly well, and that's obviously not easy, but it's definitely a way with good defenders and people that work hard that you can get at Arsenal. Now, this means you are going to give up more space on that left hand side. Throughout this season, Arsenal have showed games where we have progressed the ball a lot quicker through the centre, where even people like Gabriel have got into better attacking positions to give us that sort of quick pass over to the left. But in this game, that is very hard to do, because if you do them lofted long balls over, they will just pull out of their defensive line and head the ball away, not giving you any chance to receive. Now, in this game, Arsenal did have to go down that left hand side for this to happen. You saw a few chances happen in the first half where Calafiori had a shot where he was able to run into that space that they had given him, because they were obviously being a lot more intent on that right hand side. Now, overall, I will say a lot of Arsenal's players didn't have the best game. It was probably Rice's worst game in an Arsenal shirt. Calafiori was awful, and obviously even when Lewis Skelly came on, he got red carded, so some key positions really didn't work for Arsenal to have that progression down that left hand side, but nevertheless it would have been a hard task anyway. Now, one of the main issues that this has is that if Waneri is being very intent on and they're not letting him basically create or get the ball, that means we are ultimately relying on Trossard to create something in that final third. He can go down the left hand side and receive the ball in a 1v1, but even if he could go past a player, and I did think physically in this game he was pushed off a lot as well, deeper, which he struggled with, ultimately Arsenal do not have the options in there. West Ham has still filled the box with 3 or 4 players, and even the midfielders coming back, where we can simply not get the ball. Now, this is the most important thing that Arsenal needs to develop. We cannot play against teams that really box the defence in within the box and cannot get at them. One of the ways that you stop this mid to low block is you pull players out of position. You have to stretch the West Ham team out to create spaces inside and on the outside. Now, one of the ways that you do this primarily is through just natural runners. Having more players that run in behind on the wing and centrally would help Arsenal. We need more players to sort of pick up them positions to actually make them moves and ultimately be braver and do them together, which I do think is an important thing. Now, this is where people like Ben White come into play. Ben White is definitely a solution a little bit on that right hand side, because his overlapping and his timing and his physicality and his crossing from the byline is actually very good, and it's much better than Timber, who in my opinion is quite conservative with his passing and attacking play. So when you get Ben White into them positions, he can create for the team. He can overlap, give space to Waneri, and even pull players away, taking them on, which is sometimes what you need to stretch players out and bring some of the centre backs to go over to the wing. But this means that you also need runners in there. You usually would have Kai Havertz in there, but Marino and maybe Declan Rice at the back post and Trossard is just not going to be enough for a team that defends like this. Arsenal need to be willing to get more players in the box, and it is a problem when your natural creator or your natural 8 that is going to be there, like Odegaard, will not run into the box. He is that guy that wants to be on the edge of it, but in certain moments that is certainly not the best idea. Now, this is the real problem. Arsenal have too many players who want to pack the middle and combine combine, but not actually deliver in the final action. They have too many players that want to pass it through and maybe pass it to other players just on the outside so they can create, and they're more ball retainers. They keep the ball very well. Then actually realistically go past players, have a shot, and actually try something. Now, the only two players that we have are Nwaneri and Trossard. I have said before that I do feel sorry for Arsenal's wingers because they do have to do a lot. They are given one-on-ones, two-on-ones, and we just rely on them to basically do magic to get past all these players and put a ball in. And even when they get a ball in there, yet again, there's no one really running in there because players are just sitting on the outside the entire time, or we just get one or two players that do it. You need to be a lot more of a conjoined effort. We need to be a lot more fluid. You know, centrally, they're going to box that team up. They're going to have their DMs and their sixes in there, and they're obviously defenders. If you don't make them move, if you have Odegaard in the same positions of I'm going to stay on the edge of the box, you have Nwaneri and Trossard so far out wide because they can't get any centrally because of how West Ham are set up. You need half channel runners. You need people like Calafiori to come in and maybe make them runs, but you need players to work off them, such as Rice and other players, to make that move. I just think when you play a team like Partey, Odegaard and Rice, that is ultimately a very conservative midfield. We rely on Rice to make them runs, but by himself it's not the best, and even then Rice is not the best again on the edge of great crosses and great through balls. He can do the running well, but he's not the best again on the end of stuff. And Partey's going to be that sitter, the guy that sits there and makes them passes. Then why have we also got Mourinho coming deeper trying to do that as well, and Odegaard? We don't need three players that do the same job on the edge of the box, because yes, they can get maybe a shot from the edge of the box when there's a little bit of space there, but that is just not working for us. So we do not have that X factor in shooting from outside the box. Partey is pretty good at it in the past, but also takes some awful shots at Sky, but I don't mind Partey doing that occasionally because he is that sitter. But Odegaard's shooting has been awful this season, and I just do not think it's a worthwhile of him being on them second balls out of the box to try and get a shot in, make some runs and make some movements. Now the issue is that it's just not the player he is, and with the fact that Miles O'Skedy came on and Timber played and Zinchenko obviously came on, it's just a very conservative team. These are players that want to retain possession, pass the ball around, and are better when they are worked in space. They can make some attacking movements, but they're not going to do that when there's not a lot going on and they can't really penetrate that defense. And in different situations against certain mid blocks, it's quite hard for teams to be productive and great against Arsenal, because not only do you have to work hard to get into them areas and sort of get them duels to go, but if you aren't physical enough, Arsenal will destroy teams. We've seen how we pick apart teams like PSG and even Man City because we're just so much more physical and athletic. And although we're not going to have loads of runners, it ultimately doesn't matter a lot of the time. Against teams like West Ham, Fulham, Aston Villa and Newcastle, our record is awful, and they're the four problems that really Arteta has. Mostly it becomes down to them duels. If you look at the duels in the West Ham game, as you can see, we lost most of them on that right hand side because we're just not ready for them. They're so intent and so quick, and although we're winning some centrally, it really doesn't matter because they're getting out quick to us and we can't really do a lot. Now ultimately, how do Arsenal really solve this going forward? Now it's going to take a lot of changes, I think, within the team with personnel, but also some changes tactically. We know Arteta loves prioritising wing play. He loves getting the ball out to his wingers. He thinks that's the best space with the half channels, and that's where he wants us to create most of our chances. Now what we realistically need is to be a little bit more gung-ho. At the end of the West Ham game, we were creating some at least chances at the end of the game because we ultimately had given up. We knew the game was over with 10 men, and we were just trying to get anything out of the game, trying to get a draw at the best level. So we had Partey as the last person back and sort of actually penned him in as far as we can. Now of course you can't do this the whole game and you can't really take that risk. This is just a thing that happened at the end, but a lot more players of Arsenal at least trying to get into the box and be effective. Now we need to have our two wingers, especially Nwaneri, who is so effective at shooting and being that X factor for us, be inside a lot more. I don't want him receiving the ball right out on the wing and having one or two players in front of him where he's got nothing to do and can just pass it back. That should be realistically where Odegaard or Ben White or Timber is getting that role. I'd rather them, because they're not the X factor players, they are them creator sort of types that you want further away from the goal. We need Nwaneri closer. Have Nwaneri sit in the half channel permanently and maybe come on the inside, and even come centrally a lot of the times could help, but he needs to also make runs into the box. And if Nwaneri is going to be on that inside, he needs to be away from Odegaard. We have two players that operate the same space, and that is just not going to be the best right now. Odegaard needs to find other positions around the pitch, and if that means coming down to the left to create and help, then that should be what it is, especially because, like we said, they made sure that we couldn't really progress the ball on that right hand side, so just come over to the left and we'll leave Nwaneri on an island by himself and see what they do then. And of course it will be better with people like Saka in there, but we can't always rely on him to do miracles, especially with his injuries. That he's he's just going to come back from. And these issues are still going to happen. We need different players. And this is where I really do understand Arsenal trying to look at people like Šeško, who I obviously like, but also Nico Williams. We do need people that are going to be impactful in 1v1s, and more importantly, be quite crucial at shooting and be quite confident. You know, Nico Williams can play as that wide player, which we have in these setups, but the most important thing is that he comes inside, he runs at players and can take multiple players on. Maybe getting some help with some fullbacks or some runners that could help him even more, but it is definitely something he is great at. He's got two brilliant goals this weekend doing the exact same thing. We also need a real asset just to sit in there sometimes. I think when you have a number 9 that can come deeper and go forward, it is the best thing to have. But I do think that Arsenal, in the current setup with the current players that we have, we more need someone just to sit in the box and wait for the ball, then do all this build-up play with us, because we have too many players doing that right now. You know, Mourinho is a decent player at doing that, and he's not going to win a header against 4 or 5 players in there by himself. But maybe people like Šeško and Havertz can pull players away from each other if that was going to be the case in the future, hopefully giving us that space in there. And that's what I mean. I just think we need more riders, we need more confidence, and we need more one-on-one abilities. There's just not enough going on really in that final third for us at this moment, and it does become quite stale because they know where we want the ball and they know what's going to happen. And barring a few long shots and maybe when Arsenal show some intensity and get into the box, we didn't really have that many chances until the last 5 minutes against West Ham, which I think is a damning thing because it's happened yet again. And what I will say, because we have spoken about Odegaard and yet again everyone's going to talk about him, just put him deeper. Make him that deeper player alongside people like Partey, and this is why you probably want a different left centre mid or like Rice to be in that DM role, and let him create, because yes, he did make 4 open play chances created in this game, but the XG for them was about 0.2. He is not a final action player. He's not a player you want just outside the box making that final pass. He is the one that you want making them acute, amazing vision passes from deeper through the channels, and also to your fullback who is running in behind, who can then set up another player. I think when it comes to shove and we get into the last minutes of the game, Odegaard getting into the box is fine, but I do not want him doing that for the majority of the game because it's too predictable. And ultimately that is not his fault. I just think that's a role issue with him in the team right now that has to be addressed in the future. Now ultimately this season is probably over in the league at least, but there's still things to fight for, such as the Champions League, and we still need to perform well going into next year. There's going to be a lot of a big summer for us. We need to see what happens, and I don't agree with the fact of not analysing a game that we lost because the season's over. We need to learn from what we can do better and what is actually the problems that have happened, because I don't mind Arsenal losing. I know a lot of people think it's the end of the world, but it is more frustrating seeing us lose in games which we have seen us lose before. It's the same typical game we've seen against the Fulhams, the West Hams, the Aston Villas and the Newcastles over and over and over again, which we just need to improve. And it's not the top 6. We know how great our record is against the top 6, and I think Arteta is brilliant in them big games, but then sort of big smaller games such as these sort of teams that have a lot of physicality can definitely match up with us in that way, we just aren't good enough for. And ultimately this summer is going to be a big lesson to see if we have learned that we can actually get through these mistakes, because we need different makers in the attack and third, and we need players that are going to create substantially. You know, 1 point something XG a game, 2 XG a game is just not enough. You see it with Liverpool, they create 3 or 4 XG a game easily, and even when they don't, they can considerably score because of how good their creators and attackers are and how the team works going forward. I think Arteta has the defense figured out, but I do not think he has really figured out this attack just yet. So we will have to see what happens in the future, because this is going to be a big question as well. And just to end in it, I also want to say that I don't think that Arsenal are just going to sign a striker and that's going to be the end of our attacking problems. In games like this, having a striker isn't really going to make a difference. If Šeško sits in the middle, even if Isak sat in the middle, there is nothing happening. We're not progressing the ball enough. They're tight and compact and they're physical on us when we need to be. Unless Isak wins a header against 4 players, which is possible, I guess, but the more unlikely of that happening is actually getting good crosses in. We couldn't get much effective crosses in from the wing, and we didn't really create much happening until at the end when we threw the sink at the wall. I believe we need better creators in there. We need more creation around the team. Maybe put Odegaard deeper, put Waneri a little bit centrally a bit more, and obviously when Saka comes back that will obviously help creatively because he's an incredible crosser. But I just think that this team right now is a little bit compromised because of the injuries, but also because of the same problems we have had, and that's something I'm going to think for a while until I see it change. Let me know in the comments what you guys think overall, and thank you guys for watching. See you